This is Gridiron Graduates, a weekly podcast covering all things football. Episode number 45, Protest the Villain, recorded September 7th, 2016.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another fun edition of the Gridiron Graduates. It's the season opening edition. Hard to believe the season is finally here. We are 1 day away at the time of the recording from kicking off a brand new season. Bill said he hitting you guys back up, and as always, my buddy Ian Wharton joining me. What's going on, my brother?
Hey, man, doing really well. Down here in Houston, it is starting to cool off a little bit, which means that it is officially NFL season. The sun didn't rise this morning until after 7 a.m., so that's a good indication that the fall has actually arrived here. So I'm really good, man. I'm excited. We're on the eve of one of the most exciting times of the sports calendar. Obviously with the Broncos and Carolina Panthers kicking us off. I'm really excited, man. Excited not only to watch the games, but take on a new role as I'm working with Bleacher Report, evaluating cornerbacks, AFC cornerbacks. For Bleacher Report. So, just really excited, man. It's a new challenge, and every season brings the ups and downs, and a lot of downs for my favorite team. And but no, I mean it's all is well. It's only sports, so of course I can say that when my team is bad. But for the other sports where I'm a fan of good teams, of course it's life or death. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you what, today was actually a pretty hot one for us, pretty surprisingly. But, like you said, we're about 24 hours away from the season. Really glad the off-season, preseason finally over. We can finally watch some meaningful football. So let's jump into it. I think first thing we got to touch on, though, of course, is the big trade that happened over the week. And that was the Eagles trading away Sam Bradford to the Minnesota Vikings for a first-round pick in 2017 and a conditional fourth-round pick in 2018. And wow, I tell you what, this was one of those trades that you had to take a double look. You read it once and you're like, did this really happen? And then you finally realize, yeah, this was a real trade. The Eagles actually got a first-round pick for Sam Bradford. And now after all the talk of sitting Carson Wentz and letting him develop and whatnot, now they turn around and he's going to be the starting quarterback week 1 against the Browns, and Chase Daniel's going to be the backup. Well, what a crazy turn of events in Philadelphia.
Yeah, though, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense for both teams. Now, the first-round pick comes off as pretty heavy of a price, especially for a guy that we all know is average, I think, at best, and with his injury history, if he can actually stay on the field for 16 games, I mean that's going to be an impressive feat. He just, for whatever reason, it's a guy that just has had trouble staying on the field that much. So, I think that this was great for the Eagles. There's a no lose situation by doing this. It's funny because once the Bridgewater news happened, and I can't remember if I touched on it last week, but maybe I did. I know I had put it on Twitter, much to the chagrin of some folks that this would make sense for both the Eagles and the Vikings. And so I was surprised when it actually happened, just because you don't see big trades like this, especially right before the season.
Yeah, you did. Now that I think about it, you did kind of bring this up. We didn't think it would happen, but
yeah,
you did kind of call it.
It just made a lot of sense for where the Eagles are right now, and what they want to accomplish with Carson Wentz. I think he is a guy that he needs time to improve, but I'm not sure where I'm at on the argument of, do you start him or do you sit him? For example, with Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, with the debate, I'm usually okay with getting guys on the field early, even if they're not a great player, right away. I think that that's the best way to learn from your mistakes. It just kind of depends on your situation and your environment. Wentz, it's going to hurt not having a great receiving core. The offensive line depth scares me a little bit to put him out there already. But on the other hand, the opportunity presented itself to move Bradford now. And to get out from underneath that salary, to pick up that first-round pick that you gave away to the Browns last year for Wentz, I like the deal. I like the deal for Minnesota as well. You have a short window to win. And even if you didn't, okay, what are you trading away? If this year went according to plan, you're trading away a pick in the mid-20s with Teddy Bridgewater. Yeah, that's a valuable pick, especially in this draft. This looks like a strong, deep draft. But that's a projection, and that's a guy that may not impact your team in the next 2 years. Even if you hit on that pick, it's still, this is a point where the Vikings are deep enough and good enough to where you're probably not going to get a day one left tackle or right tackle starter. You're probably not going to get someone that's going to, maybe you're going to get a linebacker that can start, but that's a maybe. And to get there, if you don't make this trade, yeah, you're going to probably finish higher than the mid-20s with Shaun Hill, but why would you waste that year? I think this is a tolerable trade, even though the first-round pick is a big sticker shock. It's a late first-round pick. And for a team that's a deep playoff contender, even with Bradford, I think this team is right back in the mix. They might not win the division. I'm going to keep my division pick with the Packers because I do think that there's enough of a drop from Bridgewater to Bradford. But this wasn't an awful trade. Like, I know some people hated it because they saw a first-round pick. But I also think we tend to, as a society and in sports, we tend to overvalue draft picks at times. There's no promise of what that player will become. You don't even know who's going to be in the draft right now. Not even close. No clue. So I like the trade. It's an aggressive move. It's a great coaching staff. I think he's going to fit that offense nicely. And obviously with Adrian Peterson, Adrian Peterson, this is the second best quarterback he's played with, in my opinion, with Bridgewater being first. So this is a team that's trying to keep themselves relevant. All that has to happen for them to possibly advance is an injury or two. If Russell Wilson gets hurt, or Carson Palmer gets hurt, or Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, well, now they're right back in the thick of things. And they're keeping themselves relevant. I really like that move for them, as surprising as it was.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we go back to the fact that, a couple years ago, they make the playoffs with Christian Ponder as their quarterback. And Sam Bradford is, for as average as he is, he's definitely better than Christian Ponder.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why they can't, hand the ball off to Adrian Peterson or even Jerick McKinnon, let the run game do their thing, and have Bradford kind of pick and choose his spots. Now, I don't expect Bradford to play week 1 because, they're saying he's going to split the reps with Shaun Hill. I just don't know if he'll be ready this quick to, after only having about a week or so to learn the offense. Is he going to be ready to play week 1? I think my guess is Shaun Hill's going to be out there week 1, but by week 2, I think they'll be ready to unveil Sam Bradford, which I believe that Week 2 game is a Sunday nighter as well. I believe that's the home opener for the Vikings, so it'll be like the unveiling of everything for Minnesota. So with that, I think that'll kind of lead into, we'll start to make our picks now, start to preview Week 1. And it feels so good to say that. Previewing Week 1 of the NFL season. And, of course, it all starts tomorrow night, or tonight if you're listening on Thursday, with the Super Bowl rematch. The Carolina Panthers and the Denver Broncos on NBC. Cam Newton's back with the Panthers, but it'll be Trevor Siemian taking over the reins for the Broncos. But they've still got that dominant defense, and that's what's going to keep the Broncos pretty competitive in this game. I am picking the Panthers in this one because of Cam Newton. He obviously gets the edge over Trevor Siemian, but I think that this could still be kind of a low-scoring game. Both defenses will get after it. But is Trevor Siemian, it'll be his first game. He's on the national stage. What's he going to bring to the table on this first game going up against that defense? That'll be something for for me to watch. But week one is always just so wacky. Weird things always happen because, for one, you have so much time to prepare for your opponent. Most of these teams have been preparing for this game for probably about 2 weeks now. Around week 3 of the preseason, they kind of start to get their game plan together. But like I said, I think the Cam Newton factor, because it's Trevor Siemian and not Peyton Manning or even Mark Sanchez in there, to me gives the slight edge to the Panthers in this one.
Yeah, this is going to be a really tough game, I think, for the Broncos to break in a new starting quarterback. We saw it in the Super Bowl that, their defense can take over, but their defense was also playing in a great rhythm. And, so was the Carolina offense, absolutely, but it was really one of those situations where they already had their groove, and I think that they had found the sweet spot and the formula to win. And Peyton Manning did quite a bit when he needed to. He played well when he needed to. Can you rely on Trevor Siemian to even do that? I don't think that you can. To me, this was never a guy I saw as an NFL starter. And obviously, he's defied what my expectations were by making it this far, and that's props to him. But I think this is going to be a Carolina win. I think they're going to be very emotional, and they're going to be on the road, so they're going to feel like the pressure is not on them, as opposed to the Super Bowl, where I think that they felt that the pressure was on them to win and complete their magical run. Of course, a lot of their players very young and inexperienced in those deep playoff settings, as opposed to the Broncos, who had a lot of playoff experience, starting with Manning. And it's just a different ballgame. And right now, I'm looking at Carolina's offense and saying they look much improved with Kelvin Benjamin back, Devin Funchess, a year older. I think this is going to be a unit that's going to be deeper and more explosive, and that's saying a lot considering how good that was last year. Cam Newton's arguably a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, so I just think that combined with how well the Panthers' offense should progress as they've aged a little bit and they've gotten healthier, combine that with the struggles of the Broncos' passing attack that I expect, I think this will be a close, good game, but I do think Carolina wins.
So then we turn the page to the early games on Sunday. So just running through them quick and we'll kind of pick at them a little bit. Tampa Bay at Atlanta, Buffalo at Baltimore, Chicago at Houston, Green Bay at Jacksonville, San Diego at Kansas City, Oakland at New Orleans, Cincinnati at the Jets, Cleveland at Philadelphia, and Minnesota at Tennessee. I think one thing I'll be curious to watch in this early wave, I got to touch on the Jaguars, because people have been pumping them up. Obviously, everybody's sleeper pick. Definitely a tough start right out of the gate, hosting Aaron Rodgers. So that young defense is going to be tested early on. See how guys like Miles Jack and Jalen Ramsey, obviously the 2 rookies, how they handle this. That new defensive line look with Malik Jackson up there. And then, of course, all eyes will be on Blake Bortles as he continues to try to take that step forward, going up against what should be a very good Packers defense, finally putting Clay Matthews on the outside permanently. So, it's an early game, but it's definitely one that, if Jacksonville can steal this one, it'll show that they're ready to hang with the big boys. I think this is a real good first test for them, for a team that they basically went all in this offseason, and they know that, the pressure's on Coach Gus Bradley. So if they can, so I'll be really interested to see if they can steal this one. And I think they very well could. I think it's going to be a close game, but I don't know. I really want to take the upset. I feel like they can pull it off, but it's tough. It's going to be tough for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Vegas has this as a Packers 4.5 point favorite to win by 4.5 or more. I'm going to take the Jaguars to cover that. I think the Jaguars will lose, but I do think that they will cover that 4.5 point spread. I think this will be a close game, two explosive offenses, two talented and young defenses, for the most part young, outside of Clay Matthews and Julius Peppers for the Packers. So I think this will be a really good game. I'm with you, but I'm going to go with the Packers by maybe like 2 or 3 points.
What else are you looking forward to in the early wave of games?
Also with an eye towards these spreads, I'm kind of looking at. I want to see how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons game goes. So this is a game for me that Atlanta's favored by 3, which is surprising to me. I'm taking Tampa Bay in this game to win outright. I want to see how Jameis Winston and his offense performs under Dirk Cutter now as a head coach. I think this is a good test for them on the road with Atlanta. I'm not a fan of their team. I do think this will be a team that struggles this year, but it's still a road game to start the season. And so it's not the hardest of tests, but it's one that's going to say, this is a team that you should beat, Tampa Bay. Can you go in there on the road in a divisional game and get that early win? Set yourselves up for success this season. I want to see how that defensive line looks as they're starting their first game together. I think that's a really good unit. Secondary, they improved a lot with Brent Grimes and Vernon Hargreaves. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how Tampa Bay plays. And I also want to see how Atlanta reacts. I think that Matt Ryan has really, really struggled the last 2 years. I'm really worried about him moving forward. I'm worried about his future, especially with that massive contract. Mm-hmm. So that's really a game. I think it should be a close game, but I do think that Tampa Bay will win that, maybe by a touchdown.
Yeah, and for the longest time, when talking about the Falcons and Matt Ryan and that offense, we were always looking for somewhere else on the offense to kind of lay the blame. Was it the offensive line's fault, or the receivers, or coaching, whatnot? Now I think it's kind of starting to circle that it's on Matt Ryan, and he's the focal point for the reason why the Falcons have been struggling. Now, can he build it back up? We'll see. That Roddy White's gone, but you do bring in Mohamed Sanu. They drafted the tight end as they're still trying to find the answer for their replacement to Tony Gonzalez, because they just have not found one yet. But you're right, this is a good opportunity for Tampa Bay because there's a bunch of people riding the Bucs bandwagon. Obviously, as I said last week, I think they can make the playoffs. So I'm obviously one of those guys. So can this offense go out and show people that they're a team on the rise and can take that next step? Again, not saying they're going to catch Carolina, but they want to try to at least be the second best team in that division, and it starts with winning these road division games. And then also, Oakland, again, obviously the other sleeper team, and especially that new look defense. Bringing in Bruce Irvin, bringing in Sean Smith. How are they going to get after Drew Brees, who of course just got paid, getting almost $45 million guaranteed? So that's something else I'm looking forward to. And then of course, Philadelphia hosting Cleveland. I am actually picking Cleveland in that game. Again, you don't know what to expect from Carson Wentz. I understand the coaching staff's high on him, but the kid's also barely played in the preseason. He hasn't taken a snap since week 1 of the preseason, so you're talking almost a month. It'll pretty much be a month when Sunday rolls around since he had taken a snap. And this Browns team is not as bad as people think anymore. They've quietly built a solid roster. They've definitely got some talent. Now with the Eagles, of course, too, that defense is very good. All the focus has been on how much the offense is probably going to struggle, but they still got a pretty good defense. They still got some talent. at all three levels. Fletcher Cox along the D line, Jordan Hicks in the middle, Malcolm Jenkins in the secondary. But corner is still an issue, especially after they just traded Eric Rowe to New England and get let's face it, next to nothing. Because when you talk a draft pick 2 years in the future, it's really not much, in today's world. If we're talking like right now. So that's an issue. The other linebacker spots are an issue. So, I think the Browns can come in because there's not going to be a lot of pressure on them. So they'll go in, and I think RG3 can have a nice game. And I think the Browns are going to stun some people, pull a bit of an upset, give themselves a win, and improve their draft slot for next season by dropping the Eagles.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the Browns win this game. This is a really interesting matchup from a young player perspective. RG3, I'm really rooting for him as well. Philadelphia is favored by 4. I'm definitely picking the Browns in this one. It's not that the Eagles are a bad team per se. I just don't. For whatever reason, I just have more confidence in Hugh Jackson to get this offense for the Browns rolling and just to simply outscore some teams this year. I don't even think that they're necessarily going to be a great team, or they may not win more than 6 games, but there's going to be some games where they do just put up a surprising amount of points. And so maybe this is one of those games. Eric Rowe, the Eagles traded him. I thought that was a real shame. He's a real good young talent. I think it's ridiculous when you choose talent or scheme over talent. I don't understand the concept of that. As a coach, you can easily fit a talented young, long second year cornerback into your system. So that was a little head scratching there by Jim Schwartz, but he's had a history of doing that and throwing away talented cornerbacks before. So this isn't the first time. So that's unfortunate for the Eagles, I think. But I do pick the Browns here. I think this will be a fun game. Obviously, with the 2 quarterbacks, a lot of intrigue around these guys. But I'm going to take the Browns here. A very, very close game, but I think that they pull it out at the end.
Let's go ahead and move to the late window games. You've got your Dolphins taking the long cross-country trip out to the Pacific Northwest to take on the Seahawks. Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. As odd as that sounds, this soon. They're taking on the Giants, and then Matthew Stafford and Andrew Luck will be on the same field as the Lions take on the Colts. Obviously, one of the big storylines here, of course, is Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott, a pair of rookies in that Dallas backfield, going up against what on paper should be a strong Giants defense. Again, obviously the big free agent pickups, Olivier Vernon and Janoris Jenkins. So I think this will be a shootout, though. I think both offenses will put up points. I think these games are always fun too. Giants Cowboys. You never know what to expect. Maybe Dak fumbles late in the game because that's just the way these games go in week 1, and especially considering they've played each other in week 1 for like 50 straight years. It feels like. What do you think? I'm curious. I'm sure you have something to say about the Dolphins too, in what should be a real tough matchup for them at Seattle.
Yeah, I'm expecting the Dolphins to get their tails handed to them in Seattle. I don't think that'll be a close game. If you have anyone playing on your fantasy team, the Dolphins this week, whether it be Christine Michael, Thomas Rawls, I might hesitate on just because I would want to see what type of workload he's going to get week 1. But any of their receivers that you have, I would play them. The Dolphins' defense is atrocious. And I just don't think that this is going to be a game. The Dolphins have beaten the Seahawks twice since Tannehill and Wilson were drafted, but I don't see this being a particularly great game. Just because where Miami struggles the most is physicality. And obviously the Seahawks are one of the most physical teams in the NFL. And obviously at home, it's going to be really tough for a first-time head coach against that coaching staff. It's just I'm not expecting much from Miami. So although that's a lot of points, 10.5 points for Seattle. As if I'm betting this game, I'm taking Miami to cover. I'm not putting much on it, but I would take Miami to cover, but Seattle to win. And as far as the other late games, obviously the Patriots and Cardinals is going to be the game a lot of people watch. Cardinals favored by 6. Sunday Night Football. Patriots, Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm really interested in seeing how he does. I think he can be an average to solid starter in the NFL. I'm interested to see the progress that he's made. And the Cardinals, obviously, I want to see, are they healthy? And if they are healthy, this shouldn't be too hard for them to win. It's going to be hard for the Patriots without Tom Brady. I mean, that's not a crazy statement. That's not an outlandish statement. Especially at home, I'm expecting the Cardinals to win. Mm-hmm. They're favored by 6. I'm definitely taking the Cardinals there to cover.
Yeah, I agree too. You know, the Cardinals, and we talked about this last week. This looks like their year to really make a run. You know, if Carson Palmer stays healthy, you know, which we know can be a big if sometimes, but if he stays in there, this is a really strong team and, you know, one of the best rosters in the NFL. You know, really curious how they get after New England. Again, like you said, Jimmy Garoppolo, how's he going to fare? So I definitely think this will be one of the better games, even without Tom Brady. So this will be fun to watch on Sunday Night Football. And then, of course, you get to the Monday night doubleheader. Pittsburgh travels to Washington, and then Los Angeles, which I'm still getting used to saying that. Los Angeles taking on San Francisco in the nightcap. And, you know, we've talked about the 49ers before. They are probably going to be in contention for the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft because they look like they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, especially with Blaine Gabbert as a starter. Not that the Rams are much better, you know, especially at quarterback, going with Case Keenum. And, of course, Jared Goff won't even be active in this game. And it sounds like he's going to be, at best, the number 2 in week 2 when they host the Seahawks. So, you know, really crazy how things have gone out there. Now, I think it was Louis Riddick. I forget who it was on Twitter. I want to say it was Louis Riddick said on Twitter, you know, that we have to remember that the Rams didn't get the number 1 pick by being the worst team. Which, yeah, that's a fair point. They did win 7 games last year. But the fact that, you know, Jared Goff couldn't beat out Case Keenum and Sean Mannion does raise some eyebrows a little bit. But, you know, it's still early. You know, he could still develop. But to me, it's still pretty surprising that they traded all those assets to move up to get him. And he's not even going to be active week 1, let alone starting week 1.
Yeah, I would agree with that. However, it is also Jeff Fisher.
Yeah,
and that's what's weird to me. Exactly, and that's what's really weird to me is not only did he put Goff inactive, he already announced that Goff would be the number 2 quarterback week 2. So, I'm a little bit surprised that Goff didn't win the starting job. I thought he'd be a little bit more advanced than what he has been. However, it's not a good situation for any quarterback. I think Case Keenum's going to find this out very quickly. Of course, having Todd Gurley helps. But, you know, Jared Goff was stuck with the 2nd and 3rd team all preseason. And That to me was a big factor in why he struggled. Now, he's very young. He just turned 21 years old, obviously coming from the Bear Raid system with Cal to a very rigid and basic offense with the Rams. I think that we saw defenses jump that offense a lot. But there's also some learning that Goff has to do in the NFL. And I'm not surprised that they want to bring him along a little bit slowly. I actually respect that. I will say that about Jeff Fisher. I'm not going to bash him for that. I don't like how he's handled him as far as making him inactive, but I do kind of agree with bringing him along slowly and trying to make sure that when he hits the field, he's 100% prepared.
Yeah, so should be an interesting week 1 for sure. Of course, next week we'll kind of review it all, find out what kind of craziness happened, where the WTF moments came, because you're going to get a couple of them. They always happen in week 1. Maybe Miami upsetting Seattle will be one of them. Because it always seems you get that one weird upset that no one saw coming in week 1.
Yep. Last year was San Francisco, Minnesota. Yeah. So, maybe San Francisco will do it again.
Yeah, maybe they will. For me, I'm kind of feeling Chicago's going to be that team. Going up against Houston. I don't know why. Something's just kind of telling me, Chicago can go in there and beat the Texans. Maybe Jay Cutler finds some kind of magic this week. So.
Yeah, you don't seem to be feeling Houston too much, which is fine. Just seems like that's not your team.
I guess I just need to see them a little more. See how this new offense clicks, and see how I feel about them.
That's fair. I mean, that's a lot of new offensive pieces, and I don't think it's going to be right away when they click.
Being 18. It's still, and I understand why they did it. Giving Brock Osweiler $18 million a year, because that's just how the quarterback market was driven. But we'll see, and maybe they'll prove me wrong. And in a way, I kind of hope they do. If they do, great. I'll say, hey, I was wrong about the Texans all along. So I think we'll shift gears now a little bit to college, kind of touch on that quick, and then kind of wrap things up, because it was obviously a wild week 1. A lot of great games, some big comebacks, obviously.
Oh yeah, it was a tremendous opening weekend for college football.
Absolutely. Between the shootout between Texas and Notre Dame, almost 100 points between the two teams, to Florida State's 22-point comeback victory over Ole Miss. Obviously it really shook up the rankings. Clearly Alabama's still number 1 after destroying USC, and I believe you called that too. I think you said Alabama was going to crush USC, which clearly they did.
Yep, I got that, and I also said Appalachian State would be right on the heels of Tennessee, and boy, they almost did it.
They did.
They probably should have finished that off.
There. And and what do we say? It would be so Tennessee of them to let App State hang in there, and sure enough, they did nothing to prove the skeptics wrong, saying that they were overrated. They are still ranked, but like we said, and we'll see how they do the rest of the season. I guess, I don't know, was the media just that high on Joshua Dobbs that they slapped him with a preseason top 10 rank?
Well, I think part of the issue is that everything always comes back to recruiting with them. And while it's fine and dandy that they have good recruiting numbers, A, their staff doesn't develop talent, and B, I don't think that the recruits that they get are that good. I think that's one of the big issues, too. You don't see many Tennessee Volunteers in the NFL doing well. And I think that that's a direct result of recruiting and the lack of development.
Mm-hmm. So looking back, what were some of your favorite moments besides, well, obviously, I'm sure that your favorite moment was Houston scoring the huge win over Oklahoma, and of course Ohio State hanging 77 on Bowling Green. So if you want to touch on those and anything else that kind of caught your eye from week one.
Yeah, the Houston win was gigantic. I mean, that's a program win. They've now beaten Florida State and Oklahoma on neutral sites in back-to-back games.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very happy for them. I didn't expect them to win in that fashion. In fact, I didn't even expect them to win, just because. And I thought that Oklahoma early found the recipe to win. They kept feeding Joe Mixon, who looked fantastic as a receiver and a runner, but he only got 6 carries all game. Samaje Perine, 6 carries, even though he got hurt. Neither of those guys should have had less than 15 carries that game. They should have destroyed Houston in the trenches. A huge game by the freshman Ed Oliver. Great game planning, great execution by their players. But Oklahoma wilted when they needed to play well to win this game. And I think that another big issue was Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield looked awful. And my big question with him entering this season, as far as an NFL draft prospect, is can he play within the structure of an offense? He's very good at creating on his own and extending plays and getting things downfield based off of that extension. But we've seen it with Johnny Manziel. You have to at least be able to function in a traditional offense to make defenses respect you, to keep them honest, but also to keep the offense flowing. It's hard to build offenses off of improvisers only. Russell Wilson is great within the structure of an offense, but he's also a fantastic improviser. So Baker Mayfield, I thought, really lost a lot of momentum that he may have had entering the season. I had him as like a possible mid-round pick entering that game, and there's a lot of season left. They're going to play Ohio State not this week, but next week, and that's going to be another opportunity for him to redeem himself. But overall, he did take a hit for me. I wanted to see him improve, not take a step back or stay the same, and he looked about the same at his worst moments last year, and so there's concerns there. But overall, I'm very excited about Houston's outlook. Ohio State, I didn't expect them to score 77. I'll say this, though. I think I was wrong about this team. This team looked better than last year's version at any point that I saw them last year. They look deeper, they look faster, more athletic, more explosive. I think that the Buckeyes may be en route to another championship run, or at least a deep playoff run come time. So I'm really excited about them. I think that they're going to be a handful for everyone that they play this year. But also, I'm also looking at the UCLA Texas A&M game. I watched that one. Fantastic game between those two. Josh Rosen really struggled. I think we really need to pump the brakes on him as far as being a future superstar. I think he's a lot more Jay Cutler than anyone else, and I don't mean that in a positive way, really. He didn't have a horrible game, but he didn't have a good game either. He did struggle. Also, watched 2 great running backs, and especially the return of Nick Chubb for Georgia, between Georgia and North Carolina. Elijah Hood only got 10 carries, which was really disappointing. He's a very good running back for North Carolina. But Nick Chubb was fantastic in his return. He carved up the Tar Heels defense. 222 yards, a couple touchdowns, a couple of big, long runs. That was excellent to see. I did not expect that type of performance out of him, and especially to take that type of workload. Had over 30 carries. So that knee is looking good, and he's going to be back and better than ever. At least 100%. If not now, then he will be in the very near future. And then obviously, like you mentioned, Notre Dame and Texas, Ole Miss and Florida State, those were awesome, awesome games. So really a great weekend. We needed it to start the season off. Week 2 is very, very weak for college football. Basically, start off with Friday, Louisville at Syracuse. You want to watch Louisville. Watch Lamar Jackson, their quarterback. He is extremely talented. He's just a sophomore. He's not draft eligible. But I'll tell you what right now, and this is way too early, but for the 2018 draft, he would be my number one pick if I needed a quarterback. I think he's very talented. The rest of the weekend, you're not looking at too many interesting games. It's the first weekend in 4 years where there's no top 25 matchup. So 2 ranked teams are not playing each other this week for the first time in 4 years. So if you have chores, if you owe your wife or your husband or your spouse or your parents, your son, your daughter, anyone, if you owe them favors that need to be executed on a weekend, this is the weekend. Do it this Saturday. Say, honey, or son, or mom. Say, guess what? I'm going to sacrifice watching college football to do this for you. Get that guilt trip on them. But in reality, you're the winner because you're going to avoid some bad games. The most interesting game this weekend may be Baylor against SMU, and the only reason that would be interesting is that those 2 teams may put up 70 on each other. Honestly, guys, I'm not going to be watching much college football this Saturday. There's not any games that really interest me. Tennessee and Virginia Tech might be a little bit interesting. Texas Tech, Arizona State, and then Oregon and Virginia. Those are my games to watch at night. The rest of the day, I'm not watching any college football. There's not enough really to keep my interest.
Yeah, and I talked about this last week. I was really looking forward to Virginia Tech, Tennessee, just because of the fact that they're playing at Bristol. So I'll definitely keep an eye on that. Iowa State, they're always good rivals, so that'll be a fun game. You do have a couple SEC games this week. But, yeah, like you said, this week just looks really meh. So it's really, especially, you mentioned Virginia, Oregon. Hopefully Virginia's at least a little angry and shows some fire in this game, considering they just lost to Richmond at home. So, yeah, so it's nice that we had that big week 1. And then, of course, next week at least we have some strong games. Like you mentioned, Ohio State is playing Oklahoma next week, so at least we'll have that. But I do want to ask you this, though. If Houston runs the table, because, the rest of their schedule is pretty easy. I think they said they only play, like, 1 more ranked team.
Mm-hmm.
If they run the table, are they in the playoffs?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that's a big stretch for me to say that. They got their signature win.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what matters now. Their other ranked opponent's going to be Louisville. If they're still ranked at the end of the season, it's at the very end of the season. And then they also have a conference championship game. So, they may have the opportunity to play one, maybe a second one. But yes, I do believe that because they won so dominantly, that it will be remembered fondly. Obviously, if you're Houston, you want Oklahoma to win out because that win will continue to look better and better. I hope Oklahoma only loses 1 more game the rest of the year. And obviously that's next week. But, I think Oklahoma's a good team. I do think they'll be just fine. But yeah, I do think Houston is definitely on the track to make the college football playoff, and they could possibly do well in that too. It's a really good team, surprisingly, even though they don't have a ton of top tier recruits. Tom Herman's an amazing coach, and they have a lot of good talent. And then they obviously have a lot of young talent like Ed Oliver in there to kind of bridge the gap.
There you go. And I'd have to agree, too. They'd be undefeated. They'd have a win over Oklahoma, and especially if Oklahoma can beat Ohio State next week, that's just going to make Houston's win look so much better. And then, of course, Oklahoma's going to face a lot of good teams when they get into Big 12 play. Texas is now just outside the top 10. Oklahoma State's still in the top 25. Baylor's in the top 25. So there's still a chance for Oklahoma to pick up some big wins, which is only going to help Houston. So I would have to imagine that if Houston runs the table, I would agree with you. I think they should be one of those 4 teams in the playoff. So it will definitely set up a lot of good talk, because Alabama's going to be there. But you figure Clemson and Florida State, one of them's likely going to knock the other out. Unless, the committee feels maybe Florida State, especially now with the win over Ole Miss. Clemson just won at Auburn. Maybe if, say, that's a close game, and that's the only loss for one of those 2 teams, maybe they find room for both of them. And then Ohio State's, obviously going to be up there. Michigan will be in contention. I think it's shaping up to be, quite a packed field battling for those 4 spots, which, of course, you know what's going to happen now. The constant talk of, we should expand to 8 teams, that's all going to start as well. And then people are going to get carried away. Well, if we expand to 8, then these teams should be in, so let's expand to 12, or let's expand to 16. And then, things are going to get real carried away, even though we're only about a quarter of the way through this TV agreement that the playoff has. It makes for good talk, it makes for good TV, but sometimes people can get a little carried away with it. I'd be fine with an 18 playoff, though, to be honest. I would be okay with 8.
Yeah, I think
12 wouldn't be too bad. I think 16 would be pushing it.
Yeah, I think 8 or 10 is the right number, and probably 8. I'd be perfectly fine with trying 8. That would kind of allow us to get non-Power 5 teams in, and I think that would be a good step for us.
And it would definitely stop some of the crying from some of these conferences, too, namely the Big 12.
Yep.
But, that remains to be seen. That's still a long ways away. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. I think we got some good info out there again.
Yeah, definitely. The first week of NFL, so that's going to be, our number one concern. Obviously, my most interesting takeaway is going to, I think, be how quickly certain teams, like we think playoff caliber teams, get off to a hot start. Can they immediately come out of the gate and look good? Can they stay healthy? Are guys that are coming off of injury come back and look 90 to 95%? If they can, those are going to be big takeaways. Said it last week with college football. Gonna say it with the NFL. Don't overreact too much one direction. It's a long season. It's about the growth of your team. Also keep realistic expectations for your team too. We know for a fact some of these teams are not going to win the Super Bowl this year. We know for a fact some of these teams are not going to make the playoffs this year without incredible efforts and maybe a lot of luck as well. So enjoy the ride. Don't get too up or down either way. If your team wins, celebrate. Have a Victory Monday cigar. Talk some trash online until Tuesday comes around. But once Tuesday hits, we're moving on to week 2. And, so don't be cocky fan too long, because, only one of those teams are going to be standing at the end of the season, and if you know that your team's not going to be that team, you might not want to dish it out too much.
Yeah, that's why I can't wait till Monday, too. National Overreaction Day.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And don't tweet during games. Don't be that guy. I'm not tweeting during games this year. Which is easily the best decision ever.
That's an interesting idea. Just sit back and enjoy the game, see what everyone else has to say. And I guess that'll give you a chance to kind of collect your thoughts, and afterwards let it out. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks, guys, as always, for listening. We appreciate it as always. Remember to follow Ian on Twitter at NFL Film Study. Follow me at Bill_Rossetti. Follow the pod at GridGradsPod. And enjoy the weekend. It's finally here. We made it through the off season. It all kicks off tomorrow. Enjoy week 1 of the NFL. Enjoy week 2 of the college season. Enjoy high school if you're into that. So, just enjoy yourselves and join us back here next week as we wrap up week 1 and head forward to week 2. So until then, take care, my friends. We'll see you next week right here on GG.